Hello and good morning, everyone. Today I've got something a little on the unique side. The long and short of it is this month I wrote a series of bulletin articles, for the parish newsletter, and it was a series of 4, and they were actually very well received, which kind of surprised me. So I decided that for the sake of the people that watch these videos and don't necessarily read the bulletin, I'd kind of translate these articles just to video format. I've got them right here. I'm going to read them when that applies, and I'm just going to offer a little bit of extra flavor and commentary as it goes along. So the long and short of it is, I wanted to write a series of articles on my take on authority. Because authority is just one of those words that people don't seriously respect or think about all that much. I had to laugh at one bumper sticker, a car that I was driving behind, and as I pull up to the light, the car had a question authority, question those who value authority bumper sticker, and then right above it was a Biden sticker. So, okay, I'm not sure they thought that through. So, here's a little quick video on authority and why it's important and things to look out for. So one thing I sometimes say when I'm debating with friends, I'll say, "Sorry guys, brace yourselves, I'm about to say something annoyingly Catholic, so get ready. On whose authority is that so?" And the phrase comes from the fact that it seems to me that Catholics are largely the only demographic of people that sincerely care about authority as if it's a real thing and a building block of society and civilization. You're much more likely to hear one of the many anti-authoritative viewpoints these days from any other source. "We, the people, demand to know exactly what the government is doing. We, the people, demand that doctors give us what we want, even at the expense of their professional advice." Trends and vague cultural movements tend to dictate our lives in political policy, and in most cases, no single person can take credit or responsibility for said idea. But authority is still a reality for Catholics. Because for all of the sins and flaws that may rest on the shoulders of the bishops, they do not kowtow to threats, ultimatums, or public opinion. So the hierarchy of the church is still in effect, and I, for one, give thanks for that. Here's what authority means in a practical sense of the word. Sometimes I like to do this. I like to give alternate kind of definitions of understanding a word. For instance, virtue and vice. We can talk about that in an Augustinian, Thomas Aquinas kind of way of a virtue is the middle way that leads to goodness with God, and a vice is the extreme that leads you to sin. Sometimes I like to describe those two words, unofficially of course. A virtue is something that tends to solve more problems than it creates. And a vice is something that creates more problems than it solves. Again, that's not a replacement for the actual meaning of those words, but I think it does kind of help to understand a little bit better on what they do. Anyway, I've got a take on that for authority. To have authority is to know what you're talking about. So aside from things like military rank or formal hierarchy in the church, someone is an authority figure when they have good reason to speak and others have good reason to listen. A parent actually does have authority over their child. A teacher is an authority on most basic subjects of academics. While it's true that a teacher does not literally know everything, we should take them seriously when they explain good practices in mathematics or correct ways to interpret classic literature. Obviously, a doctor is an authority on medical matters, and priests are authorities on spiritual welfare and matters divine. When these people speak on their authoritative fields, on their appropriate fields, the rest of us ought to listen, and listen well. Question authority was a common quote back in the day, before my time to be honest, and it's a fair point for someone to make to a degree. Authority absolutely can be corrupted and abused like anything else. However, to perpetually question authority on general principle, it falls into a form of hyper-skepticism where nothing is accepted except one's own pre-existing assumptions. So in simpler words, to reject all authority in general is to trust in nothing but yourself. And the history books are filled with folks with that foolish attitude and the folly that inevitably results from it. If you only trust yourself, it's not going to work out well in the end. At some point in life, we all need to trust in the judgment of others with regard to matters in which we are not experts. That is where authority comes in. It is advice, guidance, or direction that from a source that can and should be respected and trusted. When we refuse to acknowledge the reality of another's authority, we do not gain liberty or freedom. As a result of that attitude, we just remove ourselves from the good and right judgment that such a person could have offered, and we expose ourselves to possible judgments from other, less reputable sources. It's a classic blind leading the blind situation. That's not freedom. And we all need more than that while navigating the chaos of our lives. So moving on to part 2 of 4 here. I'll probably break these up into 2 videos, of course. I would like to address a few things for you to watch out in life with regard to authority. And this might involve places where you do business, the places you get your news from, or it might involve the heady matters of religion, politics, or public policy. None of these observations should be regarded as absolute evidence of falsehood or misconduct. I'm simply offering these as signs that might be worthy of your attention. So here are warning signs for false authority. Warning sign number 1, no accountability. Be very cautious when dealing with anyone or anything that faces no consequences for failure or harm to others. Most obvious example of this to me, online journalism. A journalist can post absolute falsehoods and declare them breaking news. And should those articles be completely and absolutely disproven, there are no meaningful consequences to the original writers, as far as I can tell anyway. Earlier this year, for example, multiple news outlets shared a story about how NASA discovered mushrooms on Mars. It was, of course, absolute and complete fiction. And the vindictive part of my brain says that someone should have gone to jail for that. Thou shalt not bear false witness. And, again, to the best of my knowledge, that didn't happen. The world just moved on to the next stories of the week. The only justice here is the hope that such stories add to the pile of evidence that online news should not be taken at face value. They are not authoritative if they are not accountable for what they say. Warning sign number 2, contradiction of office. No one besides Jesus Christ is an authority over everything. Authority is real when it's specific. So beware of authority figures that overstep their bounds. Many politicians claim to know what is best for the public, in general, when it comes to matters of education or health. Most of them are not qualified in those fields. However, in order to further their political goals, unscrupulous political leaders will claim scientific or evidential backing. Be careful. They aren't necessarily wrong, but be careful of people who make authoritative claims in matters that are external to their profession or field of expertise. I will take this opportunity to remind you, a Catholic priest may never hold public office or serve in a civil function for this exact reason. This is classic separation of church and state. We are also, as Catholic priests, we are trained to avoid ministering to people as psychologists or doctors because we are neither of those things. We speak with authority when we stick to spirituality, or as in the case of, this video here, when we address moral or ethical dimensions in daily life in the modern world. So we can't speak about whether or not medicine works. That's not what we're here for. But we can address the moral decisions involving such matters. That much we can do. Moving on. Warning sign 3, threats of retribution. Christ did not make threats. People followed him or they didn't. And Jesus never forced someone to be a disciple against their will. Now, Jesus did acknowledge consequences for bad behavior or unwise decisions, but they were never threats. So as such, we should regard any threatening action as a warning sign against authentic authority. I want you to take note, there is some nuance here. A doctor can and should say, take these heart pills. If you don't, your heart might stop working. That's not a threat. That's just a warning against what I assume are inevitable consequences. But on the other hand, imagine a doctor saying, take these pills or I will withhold your other prescription medication. That's a very different statement, isn't it? Spiritually speaking, this is probably the most common violation of authority that Catholic leaders fall into. The Church has certainly been harsh and vindictive in certain chapters of history, and we have paid dearly for that. But remember that church leaders have to say no from time to time. We have to call the shots, and 100% of the people they're not going to agree with those decisions every single time. That is leadership 101. You can't please everybody. But by contrast, ruling with an iron fist is dictatorship 101. Sometimes the difference can be difficult to recognize, but make no mistake, a fundamental difference is certainly there. 10 years ago, I might not have thought to include this warning sign if I was making this same video 10 years ago. But these days I am seeing more and more hateful and retaliatory action against people who disagree with this, that, or the other thing. And I am not going to point to anything in particular today. All those articles and news reports, though, whatever they may be, they have one thing in common. These political or societal threats are being made by people who seek to control others through fear and intimidation. And that is a clear example of false authority. And those people will pay dearly for their aggressive power struggle in this life or the next. At least, of course, without the possibility of a true and sincere confession made with a contrite heart. To summarize the second half of this video, if you're a little confused about someone or something regarding, authority, are they a real authority or are they a false authority? Consider Jesus' actions in light of that. In the world today, who is living their life in a similar mode to him? And by contrast, who in this world is living their lives contradictory to Christ and his teaching? Those questions alone should give you a good anchor about authority that is trustworthy and authority that's a bit questionable. Thank you very much. I'm going to finish up the other half of what I have to say in a separate video for the sake of length. So keep on watching, please. Take care.